Mike, thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk all about rucking for runners. Basically, I want you to make the case to me because I have recently sort of started doing a little bit of, I wouldn't call it rucking, but walking with a weighted vest. I've been doing it a lot myself, so I want you to sell me today on why rucking is good for runners. But first of all, thanks for joining me today. Excited to chat.
Yeah, man, I'm psyched to be here. I'm going to do my best to sell you, although I have seen enough of your photos with you out with your plate carrier with weight in it that I think you're somewhat sold. So now we're just going to finish the Kool-Aid is what we're going to do in this.
Right. Maybe sell the audience, I guess.
Yeah.
More so than myself. Yeah. I'm trying
There
to
you
get that
go.
GoRuck sponsorship. They haven't reached out to me yet.
You got to do it. You got to do it,
Yeah,
man.
eventually. So I kind of said this before we hopped on the call, but you're kind of the go-to guy when it comes to rucking. You've written lots of articles, included it in a lot of your books. Can you
Mhm.
just sort of talk about like what the heck is rucking? I know maybe people have heard of this, but what is rucking? And then, rucking is a very specific term, but maybe just talk about like, walking like with a weighted plate, how similar they are. But just like tell us a little bit about this concept of rucking and why you got so interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to think about it is just carrying a load for distance. When we use the term rucking, that actually came out of the military. So I'll get into some dorky history. Back in the 1800s in Germany, people who were doing, I would say, rougher pastimes, like your mountaineering, your hunting, your whatever, the pack that they would keep their gear in was deemed a rucksack. And so then those bags got adapted to the military because you need like a tough, burly backpack that carries all sorts of survival and war stuff. That term gets adopted by the military. They start calling those backpack rucksacks. And the sort of key component of training in the military, and this is going back, I mean, literally centuries and centuries, has always been walking with weight to a battlefield. That's like how you train soldiers. That's like the fundamental physical act that soldiers do. So it's always been a key component of their training. And so they started calling that rucking, and now we have the term rucking, but at its most basic form, it's just carrying weight. And I started thinking about this because when I was doing my first book, The Comfort Crisis, for that book, I was up in the Arctic for like 30 days on this hunt in the backcountry, like middle of nowhere. And I was familiar with the Born to Run research, which basically says, humans evolved to run long distances in the heat in order to chase down animals, other mammals who are not as good as cooling themselves as we are. So we'd go out at the hottest point of the day. We'd keep just like chasing these animals. We'd bump them, we'd bump them, we'd bump them. Event bumping is a term for when, you get too close to the animal and it spooks and it
Mhm.
keeps running. And eventually they would just get too damn hot and they'd topple over from heat exhaustion. And we'd be like, we could persist. So then we'd kill them. Great. Now, when you actually go hunting, what happens after you take down the animal is you have to carry it back to your camp. All right. So I'm like very familiar with this Born to Run research. But when I actually go hunting and I have to carry a caribou, it was like, we had to split it up. I had like 150 pounds in my pack of the caribou. I just start thinking, oh, well, I guess, if you're hunting, you have to carry the animal back. I wonder what other mammals can carry for distance. Cycling through, well, no, not many because they don't have hands. I'm like, well, donkeys and horses can carry, but only if we strap weight to them. And so that leads me to kind of go, oh, like humans are the only mammals that can carry weight for distance. And so then that sent me down the rabbit hole of like, well, how did that shape us? And why might that be important? And in the book, I argue, so running's obviously something we are uniquely suited to as humans, running long distances. Carrying is the second thing. And obviously, a lot of people still run, right? Like running is the probably primary form of exercise for
Mhm.
most exercise people. But not many people carry weight for distance as a form of training, let's call it. And so I just started writing about that. And yeah, and now I've somehow sort of become the guy for this. It just kind of happened by accident.
Yeah, well, there's got to be a guy for everything. But
Yeah.
in your experience, because I know that you've done some running as well.
Yeah.
With your, rucking. So when you go on some of these expeditions, I'm assuming like you're probably not doing a lot of actual run training during it. But how have you personally experienced, or maybe have you experienced the benefits of when you go on these rucking expeditions? Say you come back and like you're then running. Did you notice anything, or have you noticed anything with your running? Getting better at running without actually running, just due to the rucking experience on some of these expeditions.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely improves your endurance unless you're on some crazy mountain, which I've been, your heart rate is not going to get insanely high unless it's really steep and you're carrying a lot of weight. So you kind of sit in like a low level. I mean, it's definitely harder than walking alone, no question. Um, but you just kind of sit in this like nice sort of low level endurance where it's tough. You can still have a conversation, and you're doing that like all day. Like I've done some long backpacking trips. I did one last year that was really long, just required walking all day with a backpack. And it's definitely benefited my endurance. I will also say it helps with leg strength, especially if there's elevation change. So I've noticed that after I've done a lot of rucking and most of my running that I do, and I'm not, I don't put in the weekly miles like you do. But I will say after rucking and when I go trail running in outside of Las Vegas, which is where I live, and it's pretty mountainous. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't know that. I definitely feel stronger on the uphills. Like the uphills are not a problem at all. It's almost like a sort of escalator effect where all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is not a big deal. So I think it's just having that weight on your back. You weigh more and your legs are going to work more. I mean, it's basic strength stimulus. So yeah, it's definitely helped me.
Yeah, well, there's that kind of idea too. So like when baseball players will warm up before they go at bat, they'll put that little the donut on their bat and start swinging it. So the way I kind of have started to think about it is like, okay, well, I'm going running, or I'm going, when I'm running, I'm not running with a weight, obviously. So I'm just going out there running with my body weight. What I'm doing, and I wouldn't call what I'm doing rucking. I have a weighted vest to go ruck, and I put a weight plate in it, and it's on my back. But it's 20 to 30 pounds, so that is a fifth of my body weight, which is a pretty significant load. So I'm thinking like, in a way, it's almost that same sort of stimulus where then when I take it off and say if I go on a run the next day, your body is experiencing your regular body weight, but you're used to. I basically do all the walks that I do now with a weighted vest. So it's kind of that. Let's like pretend my body's heavier for a little bit and then go on a run. And, I can't say directly, I don't have any data to like show that, it's making me faster, but it certainly maybe makes you feel lighter perceptually, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would say you're probably getting stronger in some areas doing that too. That's how it's felt with me. I do know quite a few runners who have replaced some of their typical run training with rucking. And they have said it seems to help them in terms of strength, but also it's not as much of an impact, which I think can be good for runner longevity. I mean, if you're training for, Boston, you got to put the miles in for sure. But I feel like for a lot of average runners, it's like if you've had issues with injuries or you absolutely hate going to the gym to lift, and I would encourage all runners to do some form of strength training. But if you're the person who's like, I am never going to do that ever, swapping a run with a ruck every now and then might be a smart choice for you.
Yeah, well, so let's get into maybe talking about some of those benefits. And I guess, preface the conversation with the fact that there's not a lot of research maybe on rucking specifically for runners, or maybe rucking in general. I think you've noted like a lot of this research is just from like in these obscure military journals, because it's the military who have particularly studied this. But given what you know about rucking and what some of your research has shown, let's just go from like a strength perspective. What kind of muscles is it working, and maybe like what do the impact forces look like when you're comparing it to running, which is very high impact, 7-8 times your body weight with each step. How does rucking maybe compare to that?
Yeah, so running 7-8 times body weight per step. Rucking is closer to walking, which I believe is like 2.7 to 3 point something fold impact. It's closer to that. Of course, you add the weight, but you're basically taking, let's say your body weight is 100 pounds and it's 3x, so you're talking 300 pounds. Well, then if you add 20 pounds, now you just do 120 x 3. This is like some back of the hand redneck math, but it tends to track, and you do see significantly lower injury rates in rucking than you do running, and that is from, to your point, military data, because these are obscure studies, obscure groups within the military, but the military is obviously investing a lot of money wanting to keep soldiers healthy, because one of the biggest cost burdens on the military is injuries, specifically from athletic training. I mean, we're talking like millions and millions of dollars a year are lost to injuries. And given that soldiers in their training are lifting, they're running, they're rucking, they want to be like, all right, what is injuring people? What can we do? And they generally find that significantly more, a higher number of soldiers are getting injured running than they are rucking. And I would also point out that, they'll do these studies in different scenarios. Like it could be a 10-week boot camp or however long they are. They're also rucking with pretty heavy loads. I mean, they're using, say, 50 pounds, and obviously soldiers' sizes are going to differ because when you think about like what's the right weight for me, you want to think about it, what is it as a percent of my body weight? Because is 50 pounds heavy for a 250-pound person who's super lean, as lean as you can be at 250 pounds? Maybe. Is 50 pounds heavy for a 125-pound person? Like, definitely. So you want to think in terms of like, what is this to your body weight? And then I totally lost my train of thought by bringing up that fact. But yeah, TLDR, the injury rate of rucking is closer to walking than I would say running. And running's injury rate, I would actually like to get your opinion on this, because you see the stats thrown out that it's like 20 to 80% of runners get injured every year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, Lord, I don't know what like the most recent stat would be, and obviously depends on like what study you're looking at and whether it's self-reported injury among runners. But I mean, it's got to be 25 to 30% probably of all runners, if not more, experiencing some sort of injury like during the year. And it also depends on the injury. It's gonna like, is it musculoskeletal, like pull a hamstring, or is it stress reaction? So depending on the type, but yeah, I mean, injury rates are high among runners because it's just so high impact, of a sport, and it's just kind of inherent in the sport. Like if you're gonna run and you're gonna kind of push your body, you're gonna eventually get injured. I mean, you do things to try to not get injured, and that's kind of where I brought the weight vest in. Not in terms of maybe like a replacement for the running, but interestingly enough, I actually used it when I was rehabbing from a stress fracture in my foot that I actually recently sustained. So my logic kind of was this. You can tell me maybe if I'm like right here, but I figured, basically go for a little while without doing anything, just non-weight bearing. And then I was like, well, I'm going to walk for a few weeks without weight. And then what if I get this weight plate carrier and then start with 20 pounds and then buy 30 pounds after a few weeks, work my way up, and then eventually start running. It was kind of like my bridge between walking and running. And I just felt that extra stimulus may actually help, maybe heal the stress fracture a little bit, but sort of just adapt your body to maybe a little bit heavier of a load. Are there any data on bone, whether it's stimulating bone more than walking if you're walking with weight? I mean, I would assume because you're heavier, but you're still kind of doing low impact activity because you're walking.
This is one of those where I've talked to a few experts and researchers, and they say, yeah, like it definitely makes sense that you would get more impact of the bones, and that would have benefits. You look at some of the studies, and they're like, no, it didn't cause increases in bone density. You look at others and said, well, yes, in this one, it did cause increases in bone density. So I've had a few people online be like, oh, you're full of shit. This study said it didn't increase bone density, and then they'll say, people should be lifting for bone density. And the problem is that I can go find a lifting study that says it doesn't increase bone density. I think at the end of the day, we need to use logic about what does increase bone density. And it's like, you need to load them. You need to have some sort of impact, and rucking does that more than walking. So I think, and especially when we're looking at like different populations, like if you're the type of person who's already worried about this and you're young and you're doing all this shit for bone density, like probably not going to do that much beyond. But like a lot of the populations that I talk to, and frankly, the ones that I care about more, are older populations who are like, I'm not going to the gym. I don't know how to do anything. I don't have the finances to hire a trainer. I'm not going to run. Like I used to get injured running. I'm 70 years old, and just adding some weight to your walk, like that theoretically seems like a good idea to me. The way that I like to put it, sort of simplify things, is that it just helps you get more from every step. So if you're already going to walk, now you're adding a weight to your body. It's going to increase the strength challenge. It's going to increase the cardio challenge, but it's not going to be as impactful as running. Obviously, the endurance effect is probably not going to be as high as running, depending on how you're running, but it's kind of like this middle ground. I think you put it well. It's like this sort of bridge between walking and running.
Yeah, because I think the case would be, not for runners, you're not going to replace, maybe replace a lot of your running with this because it's just not going to be the same stimulus. If you're
Yeah.
walking and you're a fit runner, you're not going to get your heart rate to as high as you could with running. But maybe as a cross training modality, potentially using walking with maybe a 30, 40, 50 pound weight, obviously again, depending on sort of, how heavy you are as a runner. I think cross training could probably be a case to be made maybe for rucking.
Yeah.
What's sort of the data on how rucking is affecting heart rate, metabolism, calorie burn compared to running? Is there any data on that? Because I think runners would be interested, I'm particularly interested in that as well as like, how does this affect metabolism more than just a walk? I think I even texted you this the other day. I was like, man, on days, if I do like an hour walk with that 30-pound weight vest, for some reason, my appetite is just, it like skyrockets. And I don't even think, again, it's not really like I'm rucking. I mean, I'm just walking around. I live in Austin, Texas. It's pretty flat like where I live, but I'm just walking around for an hour with this 30-pound vest, and I feel that I'm massively just hungrier the rest of the day. So I assume that there's maybe some metabolic effect there if I'm pretending. I mean, I'm almost like making myself a 180-pound individual versus a 150-pound individual.
Yeah, totally. There's this one anecdote I love. It was from one of my friends who was in one of the special forces units. And so their selection camp is, when you see Discovery documentaries about military selection camps, it's like all this, doing burpees in the sand and getting water sprayed on you. It's like, that's not really that's like, maybe an afternoon. A lot of it
Yeah.
is you're just having to navigate. It's land navigation with a weighted ruck. And we're talking like you're going through swamps. You're having to figure out where you're going in the middle of the night with like 12-hour rucks. And he was like, dude, I would get done with those. And I would take the biggest jar of peanut butter I could find. And I would dump a thing of peanut M&Ms and I would mix it all up and I would eat that. And he's like, and I would still lose weight. There was just like something about it, Generally, a way to think about it is that you do burn more calories per mile than if you were walking or running. Now, of course, the thing with running is, well, you can get more miles in a shorter amount of time. So if we're looking at it in a time scale, you go, well, you're going to burn more calories from running.
Right. But mile per mile.
Yeah, mile per mile, you will burn slightly more calories. It depends on the weight in your ruck. It depends on the terrain, but the terrain also would apply to running. But it's anywhere from like 20 to say 100%-ish more. It just kind of depends. I feel like 20 feels pretty solid to me for most people, most of the weights they're going to use. So yeah, you get like 20% bump. And
that can make sense. Mm-hmm.
I also get pretty hungry when I'm doing a lot of rucks too. I will say that.
Yeah, because I think something else with say rucking, unlike running, is that it's this cross training modality, and you are maybe getting an increased calorie burn. But I don't know, it seems like a paradox, but I think a lot of the times if you're doing a really intense run and if it's really hot out, like it'll kind of tank your appetite for a little bit. And so unlike, I think generating a little bit of lactate too sort of has that effect. But if you're, walking with weight, you're not really getting that, probably producing that much lactate. It's really just kind of like this low level sustained activity with the weights. Yeah, I think from that perspective, I mean, if you're looking for, some runners are looking to lose weight, some are maybe optimizing for performance. But I mean, from that perspective, it's like, yeah, you could maybe help improve your body composition a little bit as well if you're walking with a weight. There was that interesting study, I'm sure you posted about this recently, where it was like a weight loss study, and they had people basically diet. They went on a diet, and some of them wore weight vests and some of them didn't. And then the ones who wore the weight vest during the diet, they like maintained, and maybe it's like they maintained their weight loss or something up to a year or two later. You maybe can correct me on the facts if you did cover that study, but it was just it seemed to have some of these like lasting effects on their metabolism or body composition, I think.
Yeah, I think I covered that at one point a few months ago. I'm forgetting the details.
Well, if you didn't, fine, not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, but there is one. I mean, I do think, and this is totally just a me thing, but there is some small studies around this. I do think it's uniquely good for fat loss. Now, to go back to my sort of redneck logic here, I think the pairing of endurance, where you're burning a lot of calories, but also you're using a lot more muscle mass because you're having to carry this heavy ass weight the entire time. I almost think it preferentially shifts what you're burning to more fat, because it's like you got to use your muscles the entire time. And there was an interesting study. It was conducted on backcountry hunters in Alaska. So for people who don't know what that's like a backcountry hunt means you're putting all your gear in your backpack, you're hiking into the mountains, you're carrying this heavy, and the pack loads can be like 80 pounds for hunters because you got a rifle, you got ammo. Hunters are also just idiots in that they never use anything ultralight. It's all just like the burliest stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically tested these guys. I think they actually did VO2 tests before as well, but they tested their body fat, their muscle mass, all this stuff. They go out, I think it was for 12 days. Then they test them when they come back. They had all lost weight. I want to say it was like 10 pounds or something. But all the loss was from fat. They had actually gained muscle. It was insignificant amount. It was like 0.1%. But you would think in a weight loss setting, you're going to lose some muscle. But with these guys, they didn't, because there's this backpack on them the entire freaking time. And their VO2 max also increased, which I know you'll appreciate. So yeah,
for sure.
I do think there is something unique to that. I mean, for me, when I've done long outdoor stuff, and I will say the timescales that I'm using are pretty impractical for the average person. Like I did a 45-day hike, carrying a backpack the entire time. Was maybe, I don't know, it kind of depended on how much water we needed and food and all that. But I would say it was anywhere from 25 to 50 pounds the entire time. On that one, I lost 15 pounds. And I can just tell you, like looking in the mirror, you're like, that 15 pounds definitely came from fat, and my strength hadn't really gone down all that much, interestingly enough. So yeah, I do feel like there's something about this, like, pairing of the two things at once, because, most people are doing, like, cardio is usually an unweighted thing. You're running, you're cycling, you're whatever. But then lifting is not really a cardio. I mean, people will be like, oh, I lift for cardio. And I know you've written about this very amazingly and eloquently. But like, how long does a set of lifting a weight take? It takes like 20 or 30 seconds. Like, it's not that hard. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like cardiovascular, it's just not. So I think, but I think when you pair those things, some interesting things can happen. And again, like I'll say, not a ton of research, what there is, small studies, but they're interesting. And it tracks with what I have experienced in my own life and what I hear from people out in the field.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. And I think I really like that idea. I think that's kind of the best case for runners. It's like this, it's low impact cardio. It's very, let's call it like zone 1, maybe even zone 0. Again, if you're brisk walking, doing some hills, you might be able to get up into the upper level of zone 1. But okay, we're not going to get the same stimulus as we are running, but we're going to get this low level cardio above what you would get if you just went for a walk. But I think the strength aspect is so interesting because you are loading something. You're providing that weight on yourself while you're walking. So you're getting the strength benefit. It's loaded walking, so you're getting that cardio activity while also. I like the idea of, maybe you're not shedding as much muscle during it because you are activating those muscles. Because let's face it, like chronic cardio, just cycling and running, it's catabolic. You're breaking down muscle. You're just burning calories. You're not building any muscle during it. So that's why you have to do strength training. And again, I don't think that walking with a weighted vest could replace the strength training for runners, but it could potentially replace a session per week, or just, again, be an additive thing. Because a lot of runners, it's like, I'm already running as much as I can. I'm already lifting 2 to 3 times a week. Like, what else can I do? Well, okay. Do you go on walks? Yes. Okay. Well, add a weight. Let's do that and get these kind of extra benefits. So,
totally.
I kind of like that idea.
I will say one thing that I think that your living in Austin has influenced your thinking on zones. I will say, if you get a good mountain, you can get up into some pretty high heart rates. Like if you're, there's the mountains around, like we have some pretty big mountains around Vegas, and I'll get into some high heart rates if I'm just not going to stop. I'm just going to keep going. Like granted, I'm not as aerobically fit as you, but I think it can actually be pretty good cardiovascularly. That said, you need a mountain. But one thing that I will say is I have a friend, one of my really good friends, his name's Doug Kachijan, and he trains a lot of mountaineers, his wife being one. I think she's done 5 out of the 7 summits. And for her training, and for a lot of his clients that are into this, and all is like, he trains a lot. He was a special forces guy, got his DPT at like Columbia or something. Very smart guy. He has a lot of them use a treadmill. Set it to, if it can only go to 15, set it to 15. If you have one of those fancy Nordic tracks that can go higher than 15, go higher. And I'll have them use a pretty heavy load and just walk for like an hour. And that will make you feel like a pack mule, but that is a great workout because I know you're into like, can I watch Netflix as I do
Yeah, yeah.
cardio? And you've actually inspired me to do that, and it changed my life. I put a television in my garage. It's fantastic.
Hell yeah. Yep. Yeah, I was just gonna ask you about the treadmills because I recently actually got a treadmill, and I do live in, Austin, and it's about to be the summer, and my treadmill's in the garage. So I'm like, "Whoa, let's run some experiments." I'm gonna put that thing on, and it probably only goes up to like 12, maybe 15%, but put that
Yeah.
thing on 12%, put on my weighted vest, close the garage door, and get some good workouts in.
Yeah,
See how much I can sweat.
I'll also say, so when I was talking about injury data, I probably should have put in the caveat that, like, of course, if you're using a gigantic load, your injury rate is going to go up. Some of that just comes from the fact that if you even slightly begin to roll an ankle that you could normally recover from, if you have
Mhm.
like 80 pounds on your back, well, good luck, right? You're going
Yep.
down. But with the treadmill, you don't have to worry about that as much, especially with uphill. So I will just load, like when I was training for that stint into Alaska, I would put 80 pounds in a ruck and do the 15% and just suffer. And it was great. It's fantastic. It was the worst fantastic thing I've ever done.
Yeah. You can sort of just kind of get into a flow state as well because again, it's like I mean, obviously running is a little bit more intense, but you can't it's just there's something rhythmic just about walking, especially walking up a hill where you could just do that for hours and hours. And again, if
Yeah,
you're on a treadmill, don't have to worry about tripping, falling, put on Netflix, put on an audiobook, do something like that. I know part of all this stuff and especially for you is like getting out in nature and doing the hard thing along with it, but sometimes you just got to use the treadmill, especially if you don't have access to hills and you want to really make the walking harder.
totally. And especially if you have, I mean, I don't have kids, so it's all this stuff is a lot easier for me. I can drag my dog out and not worry about it. But if you have kids, I mean, I know a lot of parents who are like, yeah, you tell me go outside all the time, but I've got like 3
Mhm.
kids. My only time to work out is like 9 p.m. I'm using my
Yep.
treadmill. I'm like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and then you have the baby monitor in front of you instead of Netflix,
Yeah.
watching them both at the same time. Um, so a few more things I want to know, like what muscles, I'm sure there's maybe some studies on this, but like what muscles are specifically being worked and, running obviously works some muscles like quads, calves and whatnot. But so say I strap on a weighted vest, I'm going out on a walk. Are there particular parts of the body that are being stimulated a little bit more? Because the first time when I ordered the 30-pound weight after doing 20 pounds for a while, I went on, I think like an hour walk. Again, no hills, like pretty flat. And I came back and I took that thing off and my quads were they were sore for like a couple days. So I was like, and I'm a pretty quad dominant runner as it is, and probably a quad dominant walker, but I'm just curious what types of muscles are being stimulated, not only in the lower body, but also the kind of the upper body. Cause what I've also noticed is that, and this is probably a weakness of mine that I need to address, but I'm just, you get the shoulder kind of like, oh man, my shoulder's aching after about 45 minutes with that 30 pounder. So I feel like that's a good sign maybe because it wasn't painful, but it was just more like, ouch, I
Yeah.
probably need to strengthen these guys a little bit more.
Yeah. That is a good sign as long as it's not an ouch. I think the discomfort thing is normal.
It goes away once I take the weight thing off. So I'm like, okay, it's not like it's my lower back that's hurting for like a day afterwards. It's just during and when I stop, it's all gone. So it's like, it feels like you're lifting weights essentially.
Yeah, totally. And a good thing to do after a ruck is just a dead hang from a pull-up bar
Mm,
for a while because the load is compressive on your shoulders and the hanging is like extensive. So it's just kind of one of those things that just like offsets what you've just done.
yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, pretty much everything in the lower body. You're getting a lot of quads. I mean, I also get hamstrings, glutes. One thing that's interesting though, and this is one of those studies I read and I'm like, this is wacky. When you have the load on your back, so what happens is you're naturally going to tip forward. Okay, like just a slight bit. Now you would think because you have weight on your back is working harder. This study found that people's back muscles are actually working less, low back
Mm,
muscles. So then you go, okay, well, how the hell does that work? And what happens is that the load shifts to your core. So your core basically has to pick up the slack to be like, okay, we're shifted slightly forward. I got to engage a little bit more. Um, so I do think it can be good for core strengthening too, which, that's always good for running. It's good for low back pain. There's a few back rehab guys that I've talked to that when they're helping people rehab their back, they'll have them do rucking, but having the weight in a backpack, nothing crazy, but just go for a walk because it seems to kind of like give your spine this like gentle motion that it likes if you've got like a herniated disc or bulged disc or whatever. And it also improves your core strength. as well.
Yeah, the core strength thing is huge. I feel like I read something that you wrote about that, and I've been thinking about that on all of the walks that I've been doing lately because of that. I'm like trying to make sure I'm like engaging my core during it, but I've sort of been noticing that, and it really does. It just like activates those stabilizing muscles more. And you can even look in like, everybody does the form check in like the car window when you pass the when you pass a car just to like see how you're looking. But I'm like, oh, you can tell that you're just more engaged down there versus if you were
Yeah.
just walking. And I think just a lot of runners, again, if you're not, doing a lot of strength training, maybe neglecting some strength training, it's like you definitely have weaknesses, and walking with weight will reveal those weaknesses and then potentially help you correct those without actually kind of targeting them. And I think the core strength thing is something just helping with that's been helping with my running posture, at least subjectively, after doing that for a while. So it's
Yeah.
good to be conscious of it though, too. You want to, when you kind of have to be conscious, or you will start to get those pains while you're out there walking with a weight. So you kind of just make sure you're like walking with proper posture.
Yeah. And if you do, I mean, some people will use the hip belt on the pack, and that sort of shifts the weight more from hanging on your shoulders to hanging on your hips. That will definitely transfer more of the load to your glutes and your hamstrings, which can be good. When I'm doing like a really heavy ruck, and this is not like training, this is like I have I'm outdoors, I'm hunting, whatever. I will usually transition from hip belt for 15 minutes. Then when my glutes and my hips are just like, oh my God, this is the worst, then I'll just pop the hip belt off, have it totally on my shoulders. I just kind of go back and forth. And you can just feel how the muscles that are working change.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say before
we
move on, I'll quickly say the core stuff we talked about, that will apply most if you have the load on your back. So if you put it on in a weight vest form where it's kind of equally distributed, that won't apply quite as much because some of that weight is coming off your front. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess it is good to point out that there are some variations. You can walk with a forward and backward just on your back. I guess maybe just on your front. I don't know if they like make those, but there are several, I guess, variations of weighted vests that people can wear.
Yeah.
What is your take on runners running with a weight vest? Just say there's a runner who's like, I want to get one of these, and say you put 5 or 10 pounds in it and go on a run. Terrible idea, good idea. Use at your own discretion.
I would say definitely do not go heavy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so we talked about the impacts of running. Well, now when you run with extra weight, that just goes up even more. So it increases injury rate even more. Now, that said, if you're talking 5 pounds and you're sort of like, you're probably going to be fine. Do I think it's giving you that much of a benefit to risk it? Probably not. But if you like it, I know people who are like, yeah, but I love it. It's like, okay, great. Well, if that incentivizes you to get out and run and you haven't had any problems from it, go for it. But I would definitely advise against using anything heavy, like over 15, 20 pounds. Now, that said, of course, you have there's that CrossFit workout, what's it called, like Murph, where people do the weight vest thing and then they run a mile with 20 pounds. They do all these push-ups, pull-ups, and squats. They run another mile with 20 pounds. Like, people do that every year and they're fine. It's not like anyone's knees just like spontaneously combust in that process. That said, if they did that all the time, I do think you would probably start to see knee injuries increase.
Yeah, probably. I don't know what the injury rates in CrossFit are, but I'm sure they're quite substantial. Probably close to what they are in running.
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. If you ask CrossFit, they're 0, but
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the idea of the weight, running with a weight, probably not the best idea for runners, especially just because it's not like it's just like I'm gaining 5 or 10 pounds. This is not really, because it's going all in one place. You don't gain 10 pounds in your back. When you gain 10 pounds, it's evenly distributed versus just putting it straight on your back. It was funny because there was a post last week. I think there was a Cincinnati Bengals player who's, I don't know, 280, 310 pounds, something like that. He ran an 8-minute mile, and the account that posted it said, "Oh, this is so crazy. 8-minute mile at 350 pounds, or freak athlete." I was like, oh, is this crazy? I mean, it's impressive, but is this like that freak of an athletic achievement? And then, of course, a couple of people in the comments were like, oh, go strap on 150 pounds and see if you can run an 8-minute mile. And my response was just like, that's not really how it works. This guy has lived his entire life like at working up to that weight, not just me putting on a 150-pound weight vest.
Yeah, well, here's
that's
what
kind of the argument.
I don't think it's that impressive because I am not a super athlete at all. And I one time did a mile ruck with 150 pounds in like high eights or low nines. I can't remember the exact time. So like that doesn't sound crazy to me.
It didn't sound crazy to me either. And I mean, I guess my take is like that. Okay, it's always with the caveat like, oh, it's impressive for a guy who's 300 pounds, but I'm like, but it's an 8-minute mile. I mean, that's very slow. It's a slow mile. Like, let's be honest here. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's maybe impressive, but like maybe it's not that impressive. Maybe our standards as a society are just like pretty low. But anyway, save that hot take for another day.
We need to close the loop on this. What mile time at 280 do we think is impressive?
I think you got to be sub 7 minutes. I think that would be a good standard. I think sub 6:30, I would be like, okay, you're getting to freak athlete territory.
Yeah.
Maybe I think freak athlete territory would be sub 6 at that weight. Because freak athlete, that's a heavy distinction to put on somebody.
Yeah.
Athlete, sub 8 mile at 310 pounds. If you're playing in the NFL, that's kind of like just a standard, I think.
Yeah.
You know, that's the standard of what an athlete should achieve. I mean, just an 8-minute mile is just not, like, it's not that fast regardless of what weight you are. I don't care what you are. I mean, if I went and benched 200 pounds, nobody's going to be impressed with that. But if I go, oh, well, I'm only 140 pounds, like nobody cares. It's not that heavy of a weight. So I don't know. Didn't see it as this freak athletic achievement, but it was coming from one of those just like sports commentaries accounts that would probably see an 8-minute mile by anybody as a freak athletic achievements.
Yeah.
Caveat there. Yeah.
There you go.
All right. So maybe we can wrap up here, Michael. I just want to say, if there are runners who are, wanting to implement some of this, I feel like we've made a pretty good case that walking with a weight can be beneficial. I mean, everybody should be walking. And so again, I think that just adding that weight is kind of like this why not, but let's distill maybe just a protocol that maybe some runners can use in terms of kind of what % of body weight do you see might be beneficial if a runner's trying to walk with some weight? And then let's say they don't want to change their running. They're running 3 to 5 days per week. They're doing some strength training. How many days of this kind of targeted strategic, maybe like walking with a weight would maybe be beneficial?
Here's what I would say. Okay, so for weight recommendations, I would say start with like 10 to 15% of your body weight. That's probably, if you're a fit person, that probably is going to feel too light at first. At the same time, I would rather have someone start too light than too heavy. What I then tell people is to build up to what I think of as a go-to weight. And so this is a weight where you're like, this is uncomfortable, it's hard, but it's also not soul crushing. I don't feel like every time I go out, I'm doing a death march. For me, that's probably around 20% of my body weight. You also said the weight you're using is about 20% of yours. I think 20% is kind of a great go-to weight for people. Sometimes you can add weight. If you're like, hey, I want to go a little heavier this time, you can kick it up to 25%, 30%. I tell people don't go over 30%. You tend to find the military research says that you start to see injury rate increase after that. At the same time, if you're like, I want to go for a really long ruck, then maybe use 15% instead of 20%. I mean, it's kind of like one of those common sense things. Then I would tell people to try to add a ruck anytime you're just going for a normal walk. So if you're the type of person who's like, yeah, I go for an evening walk, it's like toss on the ruck. If you have dogs that you have to walk, toss on the ruck. I mean, that's what I do. I'm not like going out solo, like this is my ruck, I'm like, I'm more like, oh, I have to take my 2 dogs for a walk. I keep my pack with a weight in it right at the front door where the leashes are. And that's like when I leash up the dogs, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll toss this on. And so I'm just getting more from every step doing that. So if you weren't wanting to change your running routine, the amount of miles you're running, days you're running, not change up your lifting, it's just like look for easy ways to just add in more walking with a ruck. And if you're currently not doing any walking, I think you probably should. Be good for recovery, be good for your headspace. There's something about walking that's just so like you can just kind of let your thoughts go where they need to go. What was I going to add? Well, yeah, if you have a recovery day too, like that feels like a pretty good act if you wanted to do just like a little bit more on your recovery day. Good active recovery.
No, I love that. That's pretty much exactly what I've been doing. So my recovery days are typically, I walk to the gym. It's about 2 miles away from my house. So I put on my, you mentioned, I like how you mentioned the sort of go-to weight, the sort of, this is hard, but manageable weight. And then maybe like the soul crusher weight. I don't have a soul crusher weight yet, but my go-to is 20. I could walk for, 3 or 4 hours with that and probably
Yeah.
still be comfortable. My middle is kind of that 30. If I walk with that for about an hour, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of like ready to be done with this. I'm thinking about I think if I got a 45 or a 50, that would be like, I'm going to go out for 30 or 45 minutes and this is
Yeah.
kind of going to suck, but it's going to be really, really hard. So I need one of those. But yeah, I'll put on my middle weight, walk to the gym, go in the sauna for a little bit, maybe do some lifting and then head back. So it is a great recovery day. You feel like you're doing something. I mean, even if you just walk, you're doing something. But like you
Totally.
said, I like this concept of getting more out of every step. That like goes to your 2%, mindset thing. It's like, let's make this walk 2% harder.
Yeah.
Maybe just get more out of every step. But I think, yeah, most runners are doing a lot. They're training a lot and they're like, well, I don't want to add more training, but yeah, everybody's going to be walking their dog, walking their kid, doing a walk with their spouse, like at least once a day. And like you said, if you're not, you probably should be. So yeah, just strap it on whenever you're going for a walk that's more than 10, 15 minutes or heck, maybe even 5. And I just think, see incremental marginal benefits, but over time, it's like that's going to add up a little bit, maybe greater strength, better body composition, anything. So, unfortunately not a lot of studies, but I don't know. I'd be interested in seeing hopefully some studies like in runners or athletic populations, but these things are kind of becoming popular, just
Yeah.
the weighted vests. So we'll see.
I think we'll start to see some studies. I would also say, like, if you are a runner and you are in the thick of some training plan, I mean, I feel like runners have weeks where they're like, I feel a little bit fried this week. Like something's a little bit off. And by trying to push through that with just like stick to the plan no matter what, you'll get injured. So it's like if you feel those signs, it's like, all right, I'm going to replace one run with a ruck. That way you're still doing something and getting in miles and time, but it's not going to be as impactful and frying. And I would say for you, your 45-pound plate, that would be good to add with your incline treadmill in the summer. There you
It
go.
would, yeah. Just have a suffer fest in the garage when it's 110 degrees outside.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. One more thing I will note on that is that, and this kind of is the opposite mindset where I love the mindset of get more out of every X, so get more out of every step. But then for runners we're always trying to get more out of everything, right? It's like I do have days where I'm like, okay, I ran. So this morning, for instance, okay, I ran 20 miles. I've been working all day. And then if I take my son, say, in his like golf cart to go out for a ride tonight, maybe I'm not going to wear my weighted vest because maybe it's just like too much. You don't need to
Yeah.
do it on every walk if you
Yeah.
feel like you're training too hard, but it can be an adjunct to like your training. But also if you're feeling a little bit fried because you trained very hard and you don't have to add that extra weight if you feel like it's gonna push you over the edge, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And I saw that you have already gone out for a 20-mile run today.
I did
So,
today. I stuck it in because it's supposed to like rain all weekend, so I don't want to go out there for 2.5 hours when it's like pouring down. That's a terrible thing to tell Michael Easter, who's like do hard things. But I was soft today and ran 20 miles in the 71-degree heat and 100% humidity.
that's a pull quote. I was soft today. I ran 20 miles. Yeah,
Well, I
well,
posted on X. I posted a run on X. I was like easy 20, and somebody was like, the irony of labeling your run a easy 20, the concept of a easy 20. It's all relative, right?
yeah, it's awesome.
Cool.
I love it.
Well, Michael, I appreciate you joining me today. I think it was fun to explore a concept that's not really out there, the concept of rucking is, but maybe putting rucking on runners' radars. I would encourage all runners to just go and buy like a weighted vest. I've really enjoyed my experience with it, both from like a injury rehab and just it kind of makes walking fun because again, it makes it seem like you're doing something a little bit more than just going for a walk. So it's fun to explore this concept with you, the go-to ruck guy, and I'm sure we'll chat about something again soon. I feel like we're doing one of these either on your podcast or mine every few weeks.
Yeah,
It's
man.
very enjoyable.
It's a good thing.
Cool, Michael. Take it easy, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.